Well, I just wanted to say welcome. It's day 3 of our 2018 annual convention. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's really great to have such great energy in this room, and so thank you for coming. The vote on the resolutions and the board of directors is a weighted vote according to population, and the credentials committee, you have to have the vote count for each city and town, just as a reminder. So what I'd like to do right now, while everyone's still just kind of getting seated, is I wanted to go ahead and introduce you to someone who is going to give us some background and some data. I wanted to welcome Mallory Bateman. She's the State Data Center Coordinator and a research analyst at the Gardner Policy Institute. She works closely with the Census Bureau and has important information to share about how your cities and towns can ensure that your population is counted correctly in the 2020 census. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Mallory up.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I know all of you are really excited to hear about Census 2020, bright and early first thing with your day, so thanks for being here to learn more about it. I'm Mallory Bateman. I am a research analyst and the State Data Center Coordinator over at the Gardner Policy Institute. The State Data Center is a partnership program with the Census Bureau, and it used to be the way to get your data. So Effie Johnson over in the governor's office was my predecessor, my immediate predecessor. And so now it's shifted to the Gardner Policy Institute. And basically I'm here to help people access census data, help them connect with the Census Bureau, and just listen to census things and try to pass that information on to our local resources. So that's my role, that's why I'm here. We also have Sergio Martinez here from the Census Bureau, so if you haven't seen his massive TV in the display area, you should find him. I'm gonna hang out with him for a little bit this morning. And then the governor's office is in charge of the state census response. So we've had some changes since 2010. We've added over 300,000 new Utahns, and that's with the census estimates. The Chem Gardner Policy Institute, if you were at lunch yesterday, my boss, Pam Perlick, is our director of demography, and we're the state demographers, so we come up with the population projections and population estimates at the state and county level. So our estimates might show something slightly different because we have local context. The Census Bureau has their big Census Bureau model. But 337,000 new Utahns estimated. We hit 3 million people in 2016, so that's a shift in our population. We've also been, with that continued growth, not every state in the union has seen continued growth. So we've been in the top 10 fastest growing states every year since 2010, so that's another reason we need to make sure we pay attention to our growth and the new population we have. We also have some new cities incorporated, and we also have some cities that were very small that are now very large, and all of that has happened in the past decade. And a couple other things that are changing with our population, net migration, so people moving in, people moving out, has become a much more stable component of our population growth. It used to just be we have lots and lots and lots of babies, and that was kind of what kept us growing. Now, in recent decades, we've seen more of a shift to a 60-40 kind of split, with natural increase, births minus deaths, being 60%. Migration being around 30-35%. So that's stabilizing, so that brings in new people to our state with different demographic characteristics. And then, like the rest of the US and the world, the population is getting older. The one-year American Community Survey estimates came out yesterday and said that our median age bumped up again by just a little bit, but we're also seeing that trend of an aging population. And through that migration and through kids being born in, all over, we are becoming more diverse. So we're seeing some different characteristics in our population in this decade that are not what we have seen in past decades. So it's important to get all of this recorded. in the census. So if you have your countdown clock, April 1st, 2020, which is Census Day, is 564 days away. So not far at all. But the tools that are going to be used for response are live a week before. So March 23rd, 2020, keep that in mind too. You can tell everyone in your community they can be responding as soon as March 23rd. My birthday is right around there, so I'm gonna celebrate 2020, my birthday, with the census. So I'm a normal person. So why the census is important, there's 3 main reasons, and I'm sure you all know this, but I'll just remind you because it's important to be reminded of things. The first is representation. In 2010, we gained a congressional seat, obviously, in Washington, D.C. This year, projections aren't showing us gaining or changing significantly. With D.C. representation, but these numbers that are used, they're presented to the president at the end of 2020, and those numbers are used for all of our city government districting and school districts and any elected official office where you have district boundaries that are that consider population. This is the number that you're using. So everyone might see some changes more at a local level rather than a national level, but so just because we're not getting a DC seat, don't discount the importance of the census. The next reason is planning. Since we're a state that has just seen continued growth, we've never had a real period of decline so far, knock on wood. But we love to plan in this state. And so, I have an urban planning background, so obviously I'm a little more in tune with the transportation side, Envision Utah, those efforts, but everyone that plans can use the census data. Businesses use it. There's a lot of great tools for businesses on the Census Bureau's website. Obviously government, school districts, and we use it in the demographic department at the Kem Gardner Policy Institute as the baseline for our future projections, for our current estimates. And so if those numbers are not good, then the next 10 years of planning and estimating and projecting population are not great. So you need a really solid baseline to be able to plan accordingly. So 2020 is important for that. And the last reason that is very important is funding. I don't even have funding really big on this slide, but if you have a per capita funding amount that you receive from the government, the census numbers are the denominator of that per capita. So George Washington University put out some research about the impacts of funding in states. They did one project looking at, I think it's 16 of the largest federal funding pools and how each state, the kind of per capita amount that states receive based on their census count from 2010. Utah for that, so it's not all programs, it's not a comprehensive list of all of the ways we can get money, but for that, it's $1,086 per person. So if you think of all of the other programs that are not included in that study, each person counted is, if we have to monetize it, they're of value to you, to your city budget. And so it's very important to get good numbers there. I've included a link, so I think if this gets sent out to everybody, you can access this. There's 3 reports. There's a second report that looks at undercount, the implications of if the count is too low. And Utah in that report is actually kind of teetering on the brink of the danger zone because we've had so much growth that maybe 2010 was almost a conservative number. So 2020, we can bounce back and get to the right number. So the 2020 census environment is a little bit complicated, and this is from the Census Bureau, so this isn't me making up my own complicated graphic for what's going on. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of moving pieces. We obviously have an interesting government relationship with the public. We have a constrained fiscal environment, which kind of limited the testing that was available to be done. And Different living arrangements, diversity, also declining response rates have been seen in the 1990 to 2010 censuses. So it was already kind of a trend. So then you add in all these extra factors. It makes it more complicated to get a complete count. So for the first time in 2020, we're having online response. And that's exciting. It was put into place as kind of a streamlined way. Everyone's on their phone all the time. You can answer on your phone. You can do this really quickly. But then there's also some potential hurdles. We have some rural communities that might not have great internet access. We have some Native American tribal areas that might not have great access. You might have people that just don't like using the internet to fill out forms, might not feel secure. The data is secure. It is confidential. Title 13 is the US code to keep your data safe, so it can't be disaggregated and used to identify you. But there's a lot of factors at play. So that online response is going to be a cool thing. There was a partnership in Providence for the end-to-end test, which is kind of the dress rehearsal, where they partnered with, the Census Bureau partnered with the Postal Service. And they put little kiosks with iPads so people could go to the post office if they didn't have the internet and just go pop in, answer their census form. So there's some different approaches. And as I said, that online response form will go live on March 23rd. So don't everyone rush on the 1st, go to the 23rd. No, 2020. So, oh. I did it yesterday, so I apologize. March 23rd, 2020, so a week before count day. So another thing adding to that complicated system of what's going on with the census right now is the proposed questions. There are some changes being proposed. Some cool ones are in the relationship. So the census counts people and households. And the people, we want to know how old they are, what race, ethnicity they identify as, what gender they are, and their relationship to the other people in the household. So the relationship question has added in some choices for same-sex couples. In the past, that was not an option, and if same-sex couples tried to answer in the way that they saw fit, they would be recoded as a opposite-sex hetero couple. So they're going to be counted for the first time in the census here. The race question is getting restructured a little bit to try to address how diverse we are and how much change has gone on in our population. And the citizenship question is on there. It's currently, undergoing a lot of scrutiny, and so there are fears that could impact people's willingness to participate in the census. So that might be just, if it's on there in 2020, it's something to consider in your city. So there are some really great tools to find out in your community what might be a hard to count area. In Utah, it seems like a lot of the hard to count areas are around universities. Typically you have a lot of movement there, and since it's April 1st, you're almost in finals time, so it's hard to count students that live in the city, not in the dorms. The dorms are counted a different way. Also areas that have a more diverse population, language diversity, racial, ethnic diversity, those have been harder to count in the past. So there's this great tool from the census. It's called ROAM, the Response Outreach Area Mapper, and it goes down to the census tract level, which is about 4,000 people. It's a statistical boundary, so it's not a legal boundary. It's just a way the census breaks up our geography into smaller areas. That's a really good tool, and if you're curious about an area within your city, it can pull up a great profile with race, ethnicity, language, educational attainment, tenure, so if people own or rent, give you a really quick snapshot of your area if you're curious, or a neighboring city, you want to find out something about census tracts there. This is a really handy tool. There's another one from the City University of New York, and this one it just highlights those hard to count areas. I think their algorithms are maybe slightly different, so it's worth looking at both of them. This one just pulls out those hard to count areas. As you can see, Utah doesn't look like it's too hard to count, but if you zoom into our urban areas, you get a different picture. Ogden, Salt Lake, West Valley, even down in Provo, Orem, Logan, all of our cities have much smaller tracts, and so you get a lot more detail when you zoom in. So if you need something to do, like watch some different colors pop up on a map, this is a fun one to play with. This also pulls up a nice profile for you with some of those similar attributes. It's not quite as, there's not as much information on this one, but it is a useful tool. So I would recommend just having a look and seeing what these maps think, where they think would be difficult to count for your cities. And so I'm guessing you came because you want to know what you can do. So we are a ways out. We're 564 days out. Thanks to anyone that participated in the local update of census addresses. That has kind of ended. I think everyone has been required to submit their addresses, so that was to update the address list to make sure everything that gets mailed out goes to a real address, and if you've had growth, those new addresses were included. The state took over for a lot of areas that maybe didn't have the capacity to do it on their own. Yeah, you can reach out to the AGRC if you have questions. So what can you do now is create a complete count committee in your city. Salt Lake City, I know, has one that is getting started. Ogden is starting to get one going. So the bigger cities that did zoom in and saw those issues within their boundaries. But a complete count committee is just a way to create a team that can help you reach out to those hard to count areas in your community. So you know, getting people together, trusted resources in your community. Designated census liaison for your city, so that could be, you know, anyone who's interested. Have a point person for the census in your city. Participate in your county level complete count committee. I know that Salt Lake County has one. I'm not sure about other counties, but if anyone has any info on that, let me know, because I would love to know more about it. Check out the census.gov/partners website for resources. They have a really robust set of resources there. They have some great workshop outlines, different toolkits, different ways to interact with your citizens. And then connect with Sergio. He's here. He's in the middle. He can wave if he wants. He doesn't have to. But he's our partnership specialist right now for the state. And he is going to be, he and his I think other partnership specialists are going to be doing training opportunities about complete count committees in the fall, so in October and November. Reach out to him, find him he's over that way. I saw him this morning, his table, and connect with him if you're interested in learning more about the training opportunities. And then additionally, right now the Census Bureau is hiring additional partnership specialists in the state. Right now they have Salt Lake, Davis, and Utah County, one for that area, and then one in the tribal areas. And so that position is open right now. If you have any questions or want this link sent to you right away, let me know. I'll send it on to you. But that's a great opportunity to get someone who's already really connected with the community, get them out and have them help to get us a complete count of everybody once in the right place. So that's kind of the end of my show. Thanks for your time, and if you have any questions, I'm going to stick around for a little bit, so feel free to come and find me. Thank you.
We wanted to say thank you to Mallory. She did a great job, and I know how much data is important when we're doing our research and making sure we're taking care of our cities. So thank you again for doing that. And she's going to make that one correction, and then I just wanted to let everyone know that we'll have all of these presentations on the website, ulct.org. So if you wanted to go back and do further research or check anything out, just go ahead and go back there. We really appreciate our partnership with the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute. And as a reminder, one last time, everyone who has not yet picked up credentials, please go back and sign in over back in the corner. We want to make sure that you can vote on the resolutions and the Board of Directors later this morning. Now I would like to introduce you to Cameron Deal, our Executive Director at the League, and I just wanted to say that he has worked tirelessly, he and his staff, to make sure that we're taking care of our cities and getting everything going for our convention. So let's say welcome, thank you to Cameron Dale.
Good morning, everyone. As Beth said, I'm Cameron Deal, the Executive Director of the League of Cities and Towns, and it's now been 11 months since I became the Executive Director, and I'm proud to declare before you today that the state of the League is strong. I want to personally applaud the leadership of the League Board of Directors over the last year and really over the last couple of years. In particular, our executive committee, who's sitting up front today, Beth Holbrook, council member from Bountiful, John Pike, the mayor of St. George, Mike Mendenhall, second vice president from Spanish Fork, and Steve Hyatt, who's the former mayor of Kaysville. And you may not know that Steve continued to serve as our immediate past president, even though his time as an elected official had come to a close. So Steve, thank you for the sacrifice to continue to be part of the League organization over the last year. Thank you to the executive board as well as to our overall board of directors for believing in us and for believing in this organization and leading this organization through a difficult transition. Because of your leadership, we are a stronger organization today. On behalf of our entire staff, I want to say thank you, and I want to appreciate your confidence in us, your involvement in the organization, and your overall support of local government. We, as a staff, strive daily to advocate for you and ensure that you have the authority, information, and tools that you need to govern and that you need to lead. We have had quite a year. For example, people from 184 cities and towns attended League conferences and events over the last 12 months. Our Friday Facts email list goes to more than 3,000 city officials, policymakers, and other stakeholders, and we send that weekly during the off-season and daily during the legislative session. We had a record number of applicants for the League Board of Directors this year. We had 33, and they were rock stars. It was hard for the nominations committee to have to narrow it down because of the number of rock stars that applied to lead this organization. We've had great interest in caucuses, the Land Use Academy of Utah, Women in Local Government, the Legislative Policy Committee, and the other programs that we have for you. Ultimately, the strength of the League is you, the membership, and for that we thank you. As I mentioned, I was hired 11 months ago. So when I stood before you at the annual conference last year, I'd been announced as the director, but I had not yet officially started. I can tell you it has been exhilarating, it's been humbling, it's been exhausting, it's been satisfying. Can we switch over to the PowerPoint here? Because I can tell you that I certainly feel older. Oh, we got to go all the way through the census stuff. I certainly feel older, even if I now look a little bit younger. And Mark and Mayor Caldwell, when that picture was taken of my daughter and I, Weaver State had the lead.
Why are you smiling?
Yeah, it was a pretty brutal first quarter. I thought my daughter was bad luck. But thankfully, we scored a touchdown, and then she decided she was done. You could tell you could see the look of concern on her face about the scoreboard at that point. When I stood before you, though, last September, we made commitments to you as staff of what we were going to try to accomplish in our first 100 days and over the first year. And I'm proud to acknowledge and declare that we have made significant progress in all 6 areas that we put before you last year. We promised we would address the structure of the League, that we would improve our sponsor and partner outreach and really have a focus on collaboration, that we would look to improve our training programs, that we would improve our legislative advocacy and outreach, that we would reinvest in research, and that we would prepare a strategic communications plan for the board and staff so that we can advocate for you. And as I mentioned, we feel like we've made significant progress in all 6 categories. I'm going to take a quick moment and just touch on those briefly. First, structurally, we created a Constitution Review Committee, and back in the spring, you voted to expand the Board of Directors because of the results and the findings of that Constitution Review Committee. The Board of Directors held their first retreat in decades to give us marching orders as staff. We created an open process for you to serve on behalf of the League on state boards and commissions. We started the caucuses so that you can engage with each other as communities of commonality. Buttressing that structure is a competent and devoted staff. Our internal operations have improved. We're on time noticing meetings and submitting other documents to the state as required by law. We came in under budget this year, utilizing our limited resources more efficiently than before while still providing value to you. We're transparent with our finances regularly reviewed and scrutinized by our board and treasurer. We have regularized our HR practices, and we have worked hard to create an enjoyable and supportive work environment for our employees. On the sponsor side, we created a sponsorship program for our 21 sponsors. We increased the number of sponsorships of companies that are supporting the league, and we increased our overall sponsor revenue by 17% this year. We are working hard to grow partnerships with a variety of organizations, ranging from Wasatch Front Regional Council to the Economic Development Corporation of Utah to Water Now, Golden Spike, and others. On the training, I mentioned that 184 cities and towns attended programming in the last 11 months. We overhauled our elected officials' essentials and brought in some of those partners that I just referenced. We have our Land Use Academy of Utah, which has videos and other resources for you so that you can better understand land use and be able to implement that in your communities. We hosted the first ever Rural Mayor Summit in collaboration with our counterparts from the Idaho and Wyoming Associations of Cities. Thanks to Utah State University for hosting not just the Rural Mayor Summit, but for facilitating our elected officials' essentials and our other trainings. Then, as you know, we overlapped with UAC and mid-year, and we've re-engaged with the National League of Cities. And I, as a director, have met with directors from more than 40 states, either by phone or in person, to learn what's happening there, how we can learn from them, and what's happening in their state houses, so that we can learn from each other. Legislatively, we tracked 301 bills this past legislative session. Rachel, well, her first session, 301 bills, and thank you for your tremendous work overseeing that effort. We had success on 89% of our priority bills, and we stood on principles of local control. We published a legislative preview. We've created the prism of principles about local control that we could stand on as an organization. We did our legislative wrap-up after the session. You as a League Army, you're welcome, Mark. You as a League Army were successful in pushing back against state overreach. And I'll remind you of one particular bill that was really symbolic of what we faced last year and what we're going to face again in the year and maybe years to come, and that was House Bill 175. That was an attempt by the legislature to create an oversight committee of 9 legislators that would have the jurisdiction to evaluate the efficiency or effectiveness of any local government ordinance in the state. Doesn't matter if you were a school board, city council, county commission, 9 legislators would have had the authority to say, you know what, Richfield, we think that was inefficient or ineffective. Or, you know what, Ivans, sorry, Mayor Hart, we don't trust you guys. It doesn't matter that we're not actually from Washington County because we're 9 members from around the state, but we're gonna step in and say it's inefficient or it's ineffective. We fought off that bill because of your help. That type of bill, unfortunately, is happening in states around the country. On the research side, I mentioned the local government prism. This was the first time we ever used a prism like this, and legislators respected it because it was no longer just about politics, it was about the policy. And we actually had a member of House leadership say to us, you guys opposed too many bills this year. And my response back to that member of House leadership was, stop running bad bills. And I meant it, and I've had several conversations with him since. It is essential, though, that legislators hear that message from all of us. Not just from Rachel, not just from Roger, not just from me, not just from the board, but from all of us. On the research side, we've reinvested in research, and we've been doing it through partnerships. You're going to hear later today from Y2 Analytics, which is the premier polling firm in the state. We've entered into a relationship with Y2 along with Wasatch Front Regional Council and the Salt Lake Chamber to talk about what do residents think about growth. And you're going to be fascinated by the findings. The poll closed Monday, and on Tuesday they presented the high-level findings to our board of directors. And we're going to be working through those results in the weeks to come. We've partnered with the Utah Foundation for a survey that will come out next week to your cities to better understand what's happening on the ground about land use, so that we have the information we need to be better advocates for you. We released the Keys to Housing document to try to keep the focus on this overall discussion on housing about the real big picture of what's going on there. And then we've been doing tremendous legislative research behind the scenes, whether it's on Opinion 1, the opinion question on the ballot about the gas tax, water survey, and other resources that help us in our legislative advocacy. On the communication side, hopefully you've all seen our expanded social media presence. We're still trying to get better at it. I'm in my 30s, not my 20s, but we're doing our best. We created a rapid response team so that we could complete the narrative about inaccurate articles or posts. And we've been able to get traction. So for example, we've had 3 different experiences this summer where there's been an article referencing cities that was incorrect. And then we released statements correcting the record. Those reporters then followed up with us, did subsequent articles where they were quoting us, and it allowed us to provide you with something that then you could share with your residents and say, actually, that's not quite right, so that we could take the arrows for you when we try to correct the record. So we'll continue to do that. We started the Wednesday web chats, which we do every legislative interim day, and then we do at other times during the week. We created a new Friday Facts template and reorganized our website accordingly. Carson at lunch today is going to take a couple of minutes and just show you all the materials that are on that website. By a quick show of hands, how many people get Friday Facts? Awesome. How many people like the Utah football references in Friday Facts? That's a markedly smaller number. Okay, duly noted. If you don't get Friday Facts, please go to the credentials desk, go to the reg desk, make sure we get your email so that you can be part of that list and be informed of what's happening that impacts you. We've met with editorial boards and reporters, and then the board has partnered with Penna Powers, which is a communications firm in town, to reboot the term local control. When we say local control, generally speaking, we know what that means. Yet we have had special interest groups and even legislators who use that term against us, and we need to take our term back. Penna Powers will be leading that effort so that we can inform policymakers and stakeholders and the general public why local control and why local government matter. To that point, why does local government matter? To us, it's simple. You are the government that impacts people's daily lives. You are part of the League Army, 1,380 mayors and council members around the state. You know what's happening at each intersection. You know what's happening in each neighborhood in your hometowns. Guess what? Your constituents know too. They may not understand the nuances of federal tax policy. They may not understand foreign policy. They may not understand the weighted pupil unit for state education funding. But they care about what happens on State Street and Vine Street to the old library. Murray, am I right? Yeah, right, Mayor Camp? As a Murray kid, I care about what happens to that building, but we can chat later. I'll spare you my opinion for now. But you as elected officials in Murray have heard from your residents about what's going to happen to my childhood library. And all of you have libraries like this one in your hometown too, where you hear from your residents. The reason you hear from them is because you are the most accessible, responsive, and accountable elected officials. After all, local government is where government works. Local government is also the front line of the future, which, as you know, has been the theme for the conference this week. Everything we've done this week has been to try to prepare you with the tools, information, and policy trends that you need to know. Many areas in Utah are growing. Those areas face challenges in transportation, land use, housing affordability, affordable housing, which, by the way, are 2 different issues, water, education, and tax policy. For areas that are not growing today, Pam Perlich warned us yesterday that your areas are going to grow tomorrow. So even though the growth pressures today may be in Saratoga Springs and Syracuse, tomorrow they're going to be magnified in Nephi and in Nibley. So we as a local government have a choice. We can manage growth, or growth will manage us. Now, by a quick show of hands, how many of you were uncomfortable at lunch yesterday? Raise them high. I mean, be honest, okay? I heard some people chuckling as well. How many of you wanted the chance to rebut what you heard? Yeah, the chuckles just got bigger. It was uncomfortable. It absolutely was uncomfortable. But those are the arguments that we're hearing at the Capitol about local government. Those are the arguments we're hearing from other stakeholders about how local government is an obstacle to progress. You need to know that those arguments are out there. You need to know that there are legislators and entities that don't trust you to make good local land use decisions. You need to know that some view local government as an obstacle to progress. For example, here are some of the actual quotes that we've heard on the Hill just this summer about local government. Go ahead, take a look. This is what we are hearing as we go to the Capitol to advocate for you. This is just a sampling. A couple others here that I wanted to emphasize. There are some who want to change the 50-50 formula for our local option 1%. There's been this narrative that cities are zoning for dollars. That was a narrative that we heard back in the 90s, and that cities are denying housing applications because they're chasing retail dollars instead. A couple quick things for everyone to realize, particularly those of you who maybe were newly elected in November, about what the local option 1% sales tax is. First of all, it is a city tax. It is not a state tax. It is a city tax that all of your cities imposed. The formula, the 50% point of sale, 50% population, was a city-crafted compromise. And we have long-standing resolutions here at the League, this one from 2011, another one from 2005, and others that go back. It's why the resolution process matters, where we stand up for that 50-50 compromise. We stand up for our local option because, again, it's our money. You imposed the tax. The state did not impose that tax. Now, there have been other conversations about what happens with online sales tax. There have been other conversations about tax incentives. So if you were to offer an incentive of sales tax to a company, for example, to come into your city, those are separate from the underlying issue of the 50-50 and the underlying issue of the local option 1%. In fact, we did a Wednesday web chat with senior tax guru / Oracle Roger II there in the middle, and a couple of his former colleagues from the Tax Commission, specifically about how online sales tax works with the local option 1%, the 9-digit zip code for how the money is distributed. And that's available on our website and goes into depth about how the Tax Commission is collecting that money. The conversation about online sales tax, the conversation about tax incentives, those are fair policy issues, but they are different than the underlying issue of our 50-50 formula. Now, we've also heard from legislators that the state must force a city to act, and that the state is offering to give you political cover to make hard decisions. The question that we have for you is political cover really what we want? You as elected officials, do you want political cover from the state to make hard decisions? Oh, okay. Do you want political cover? What does that mean, Lisa says from Springdale? That's a very fair question. And part of the reason this comes up is we've heard from certain legislators who say, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We don't trust cities to do X, Y, and Z, so we're going to do it for you. And because we'll make the tough decision and we're more removed from your angry residents, we'll give you the political cover by us making the decision. Or, yeah, somebody just said, or remove. Yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Ultimately, collectively, we need to deliver the message to the legislature that local government, not only is local government the most responsive level of government, but government closest to the people governs best. And you need to deliver that message to legislators. And we're here to help you. We're willing to join you at any time, any place, to meet with legislators to help deliver this message. It's imperative that we complete the narrative. We know that yesterday was uncomfortable, but that's a good chunk of the narrative. And there were things there that you needed to hear because that is what is happening in the discussions this summer. It's imperative that we collectively complete the narrative that you as local government officials are balancing the needs of your current residents and your future residents. It's imperative that we complete the narrative that growth done well brings connectivity, less impact on resources and infrastructure, and creates a sense of place. Growth done poorly and growth planned poorly erases that sense of place and overwhelms infrastructure. We need to complete that narrative. We need to complete the narrative that there are housing costs that are outside of your control, such as a labor shortage or construction costs or the overall cost of land. We need to complete that narrative. We need to complete the narrative that there is an actual need for true low-income affordable housing. So how do we address that? And what role and what keys do cities have versus what keys do other entities have for the true low-income and moderate-income affordable housing? We need to complete the narrative that infrastructure is not free, that infrastructure and services require a collective investment by all of us. We need to complete the narrative that when you impose fees, it's done in a responsible way, and that those fees often don't cover the entire cost of growth anyway. And we need to complete the narrative that while developers build buildings, we build communities. We are working as staff, and the board is working to complete that narrative. I mentioned about rebooting local control. The reporters and editorial boards we met with, we've been investing in the research. We're meeting with legislators, business leaders, the governor. We have tried to be in every room, in every subgroup, in every committee this summer to make sure that the narrative is completed. We're all in this together. We also recognize, though, that cities have a role to play. And we can't be naive about that piece of it. We have to complete the narrative, and we have to recognize our part in the narrative. Pam Perlich said yesterday that we cannot say, let another city deal with growth. We all have a role to play in preparing for population growth. We all have a role to play in addressing housing affordability and affordable housing. But it's imperative for us to complete the narrative of what that really means. We all know that we can't rely on nostalgia as a policy. We all know that what happens in one city affects another city, whether it's planning or politics. We know we need to think regionally as we're acting locally. And we're working hard to make sure that you have the authority you need to lead and govern. The last thing is this tension is not unique to Utah. I mentioned that we've been meeting with other leagues around the country. And I can give you at least 10 examples of other leagues that are facing this sort of tension around population growth and housing prices and state involvement in local government matters. It's particularly strong in states that are having strong economic growth. For example, in Massachusetts, the league there actually brokered a grand bargain with all of the stakeholders, business community, legislators, the governor, and others about how to handle growth and prepare for growth. Every stakeholder won some and lost some. And I was meeting on the phone with the director of the Massachusetts League just last week, talking about what worked and what didn't work, and trying to learn some lessons from Massachusetts. Ditto in Texas, ditto in Tennessee, in Idaho, in Washington, and Colorado. Another interesting lesson, though, that I learned from the director of the Florida League, which I think is important for all of us to know, and that is that your voice matters. In the Florida League, in the Florida legislature, the former Speaker of the House supported 40 bills last year that would have either preempted local authority or created an unfunded mandate on local government. And the Speaker was using it as a centerpiece for his gubernatorial run. All 40 passed the House. The Florida director told me he had never seen his membership mobilize like they did in the Senate during this past legislative session. And they successfully killed almost all of those bills. That speaker ran for governor, didn't get out of the primary because local government was so inflamed. There's a lesson there. Your voice matters at the Capitol. Now, the good news is we have excellent working relationships with the governor and with the legislature. Even with legislators with whom we disagree, we have a good working relationship. The door is open. We are working hard to complete the narrative, but we need you as local elected officials, as mayors and council members who represent the same constituents that those legislators represent. We need you to complete the narrative with them about the challenges that you're facing on the ground. Why is it then that residents are frustrated by growth? What is it? Are they concerned about change? Are they concerned about the impacts? Are they concerned that we're growing in the wrong place at the wrong pace? Are they concerned about property values? Are they concerned about the change to the neighborhood or to the ward or to the quality of life? Is it because they only see the impacts and not the benefits of growth? We all know that it doesn't matter if a new resident lives in a single-family home or in a 10-story apartment tower. If you don't have access to jobs or transportation, education, recreation, water, sewer, and infrastructure, then your quality of life does suffer. We also know it doesn't matter who actually makes the underlying decision, whether it's a legislator or a mayor, if we don't plan for that quality of life. And you're on the front line of preparing for that quality of life. And we have cautioned policymakers and other stakeholders that the dialogue right now is well ahead of where the population is at. We're ahead of residents on growth, and we're ahead of residents on all of the related issues. We are fighting against one-size-fits-all approaches because we recognize that we need to consider the differences of the economic growth challenges in a Moab and a Vernal, which are different than the economic growth challenges in a Lehigh and a Harriman. And the demographic challenges in a St. George are different than the demographic challenges in a Monroe. Indeed, one size misfits all. Policymakers think they know, certain legislators at the legislature think they know what residents are looking for. We felt like we needed to ask the experts. And so that's why the board contracted with Y2 Analytics to actually understand what people are thinking. And if you want the pulse of Utahns, look no further than Y2 Analytics. So it's my pleasure right now to introduce Scotty Riding, who's the managing partner of Y2 Analytics, to give you a snapshot of what they've learned in the focus groups and the survey that they've been working on for the last few weeks. So that you know, Rachel Otto and I spent a combined 8 hours in the focus groups, and we've provided input on the questions along with the other partners. And so we're excited to welcome Scotty Riding to the stage. Scotty.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that introduction, Cam. I want to recognize a couple of my colleagues, Dr. Kelly Patterson and our Director of Research, Kyrene Gibb, who have worked quite a bit on this. Cam mentioned it's been a quick turnaround research project, and there's been a few late nights, so I just want to make sure they're recognized. Quick introduction. We are a research firm in Salt Lake, and when I say research, I mean public opinion. We've been around for a number of years now, and in fact, I think if you ask around, you'll find that many of your colleagues are our clients. We've had an opportunity to work on local issues, ranging from something I'd almost call anti-NIMBYism around golf course retention across the county. Yeah. All the way up to some of the most, impactful issues in the state. And our expertise has been the intersection of the realities of how voters react to public policy and what's best for the future of our communities. In that capacity, we've watched as the issue of growth and the issue of housing affordability has moved from being almost hyper-local around individual developments to what I would characterize as a regional challenge from a public opinion standpoint. So we were asked to research this thoroughly, and I'll introduce you to what that looks like in a moment, but just understand our objective here. We're public opinion people. We want to understand why people feel the way they do. I try and warn people when we present these results. I don't expect the public to be fully rational. You're going to find that there are cross-cutting considerations, and that's okay. That's how public opinion works. As part of that, I'm hoping to show you both the challenge and then later in a breakout session, some opportunities for us as we're trying to navigate these waters. So our goal here was to understand the landscape of the issue, the scope of the issue, understand the motivations of voters, and frankly, their fears. And what, if anything, among the policy levers we have to pull, we can do to both be responsive as well as to help them understand the challenges we're facing. As is obvious to everyone in this room, the public will have their say, regardless of what legal levers are available to them. That's not obvious to every stakeholder, by the way. But I know that's intuitive to you, and it's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that you were equipped with this information. Let's see. I'm honestly not sure how this works. Do I just push a button? Oh, good. Okay. So this is a 3-phase research project. Phase number 1, we went back in time. We pulled newspaper articles, op-eds, government studies to look for what sorts of things were being said in the public sphere, what information are voters being exposed to beyond just that in their own communities. And we added to that some social media chatter, right? What if people broadcast online? That informed a set of in-depth focus groups in which we're exploring, probing, engaging voters, and trying to understand their expectations, motivations, and fear. And when I say probing, I mean it. We asked very, very hard questions of voters. We forced them to face some of the inconsistencies in their views, and they were very comfortable with that, as uncomfortable as it was. And that all culminated into what I believe is the key part of this research, a representative scientific survey of over 2,000 voters across the 9 highest growth counties. And what we're trying to do here is quantify awareness. Cam mentioned that we think we're a little bit ahead of voters, and I think that's true. To quantify understanding and to test their preferences for how growth happens, especially various aspects of housing. Okay. I'm going to share with you some highlights. I mentioned that this is hot off the presses, so I'm just going to introduce some pieces to this. There's going to be more analysis coming through the next few weeks, but in this session and in a breakout session, we'll share with you what we have so far. There has been too much focus on economics and not enough focus on what the public wants and desires, and that shows up here. So first of all, most important issue. This is a very common question in public opinion surveys. When asked, which of the following do you consider to be the most important issue facing Utah and its communities? I went back to 2008 every year to see how this question has stacked up across a variety of research organizations. And this is the first time that housing affordability has ever even been in the top 5, much less the top issue. Okay? Usually education, sometimes, often during inversions, air quality, and often, jobs and the economy show up at the top. But right now we're seeing in these areas, housing affordability is number 1. In fact, if we combine some of these as directly growth related, housing affordability, air quality, education, infrastructure, and water supply represent 70% of what people think are the biggest challenges facing their communities. Now, there is a little bright star here. Only 22% of voters bring up housing affordability, which means there's a long tail of issues. We're on the cusp of awareness of this issue, and there's an opportunity for us to educate. We asked people how they felt about the pace of growth. And the common reaction is that voters are feeling rushed. In fact, 63% say that we're growing too quickly, 33% much too quickly, 30% a bit too quickly. In fact, only 34% say we're growing at an appropriate pace. And one of the most important analytical tasks for us, and one of the things that we want to work with your cities is, for those voters who see appropriate growth, what are the attributes? Okay, what is it that is happening? What are their cities doing to accommodate the growth in ways that make them feel better about it? And then role. Who should be responsible for planning for growth? And I hope this is comforting, right? We gave them a variety of options. They could select all the people that they believed should be responsible. And you'll see that the plurality of voters put local city and town governments in the primary spot. I'll warn you, though, that it's not the only player that voters expect to play a role in this. Community groups are on that list, the legislature, the developers, the governor. They expect this to be a team effort. And so while rightfully, and I believe that Cam's approach to this is correct, you should take the lead, recognize that if this becomes a tug of war between these groups, that voters probably aren't going to be perfectly pleased about that. Okay. That's just a quick highlight to save your time this morning. I'm going to be upstairs from 11:15 till 12:15 in the Wasatch Room, be walking through not only more contours about the challenge and some of the reactions to growth among voters, but also some of the potential solutions and some of the options that we have in terms of growing that are most palatable to those who are facing it. So I hope to have you join us there. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Scott and to the team at Y2. This data that we will continue to tease out is part of our overall efforts to complete the narrative. It's another chapter in this book, and we will continue to explore what that data can do to help us as we, again, approach another legislative session where we will face plenty of difficult conversations on this topic. So what else are we doing to address the housing issues that face our state? This week we've been asked that numerous times, and we know, as Cam said, that cities across the nation I'll keep going. Oh, here we are. In case you missed the Y2 data the first time around, here it is again. As Cam mentioned, cities across the nation are facing this issue. This isn't unique to Utah. But we're diving deep, as Cam mentioned also, into strategies and policies that have worked in other places and have not worked in other places as we look into how Utah will take a unique approach to this problem. So in a minute, I will introduce a comprehensive resolution that the League Board has asked me to present today, and I hope you'll support it as a balance between planning for the future and preserving your community's unique character. But first, I want to just briefly revisit how the landscape has shifted over the past year. So this is from the January 8th LPC, and actually as I was looking yesterday through where we started this conversation a year ago, I was actually surprised to see so early, before the session even started, how we began this discussion on housing affordability and affordable housing. But where the conversation really started at the beginning of last session was where the state legislature was very focused on homelessness. We started the session with a concept of a bill that would penalize cities for not having enough affordable housing as determined by the legislature. We fended that bill off as a bad policy that punished cities for what was truly a market failure. But the conversation, of course, didn't end there. Throughout the session, we worked with Representative Logan Wild on HB 259, the Moderate Income Housing Amendments. This bill requires most cities to develop a moderate income housing plan as part of your general plan to truly start understanding the housing stock that you have in your community and plan for what you anticipate the housing stock needs to be for the future. Towards the end of the session, we supported a bill, HB 430, that created the Commission on Affordable Housing. The commission was first intended to explore policies and strategies to address the shortage of true low-income housing, where the gap truly is in our housing stock. But by the end of the session, that conversation had grown even larger, expanding into housing in general and the fact that Utah is facing a housing shortage. And the Commission on Housing Affordability was born, two different things. So that commission met this summer and formed into 7 different subgroups in the areas of rural issues, affordable housing production, transportation-oriented developments, land use, financial tools, marketing education, and research. So needless to say, we went to many meetings this summer. Thanks to many of you, you also attended many meetings this summer, and the League had 2 appointments on that commission, Councilmember Chris Condi from Lehigh and Councilmember Andrew Johnston from Salt Lake City. So with their invaluable support and the support of many of you in this room, League staff and the League was in every room this summer, at every table where this was being discussed this summer. And we were there because we don't want that narrative to be one-sided. We have pushed back with data like this, showing that the people who are really struggling are those who are well below the average income. We've been in the room to remind the commission that density for the sake of density is not smart growth and does not automatically equal affordability. Still often confused. And you guys get that. You understand that. And we need to remind our legislators, our developer legislators, that as well. And we have been in those rooms to push back on the idea that we are, in a million years, ever going to support policies that incentivize market rate development anywhere, any way, for any reason. So that brings us to now, with the 2019 session right around the corner. What else are we doing to prepare? You just heard from Y2 on the fantastic data that they're collecting, and we feel that that will be invaluable as we actually can truly explain the issue to legislators, to our stakeholders, and to our citizens. This isn't a vocal minority. This is an issue where the majority of our residents think that growth is happening too quickly, and they trust you to figure it out. So we're also working with the Utah Foundation, as Cameron mentioned earlier, and they're about to launch a survey that will collect comprehensive information from your communities on planning and zoning, land use, and development fees. It's essential that we get this data from you so that we can tell the real story about what's happening on the ground in our cities and how you are preparing for growth in the way that fits best into the fabric of your community. I've had a great opportunity this week, especially to sit down and talk with many of you on how you are doing that, and across the board, whether you're in Nibley, whether you're in Nephi, whether you're in Salt Lake City, West Valley, everyone is doing this, they're being proactive, and we need to tell that story. And your actions really do matter here. Already, legislators are saying that HB 259 from last session did not go far enough, that the Moderate Income Housing Amendments Bill should include penalties, that there need to be penalties on cities that don't include a certain stock of a certain type of housing. We have pushed back so far, but our best argument here will be your actions. And for example, we can use these actions. Did you know that more multifamily housing was built in Salt Lake County in 2016 than in any time since 1984? That more multifamily housing was built than single-family housing in Salt Lake County in 7 of the last 10 years. 64% of new units in 2017 in Salt Lake County were multifamily. So cities are not the obstacle here. We're building at a faster pace than ever. And don't ignore also the Gardner Institute's own statements since they released their May 2018 report that we've been delving into this week. Since that report's been released, the Gardner Institute has clarified that half of the 43,500 unit shortage is actually being absorbed by units that would typically remain vacant in a healthy market. The number of building permits in 2018 is anticipated to come close to or even match the number of new household formations. And in a presentation to the Commission on Housing Affordability just last week, Jim Wood clarified that we will not be approaching San Francisco housing prices. The market constraints in Utah are such that that is not in our future. So we do have a housing shortage. There is no doubt about that, and especially for those in the lower and middle incomes. And we need to work together to figure out how we're going to alleviate that problem. But these facts all matter, and we need to counter the incomplete narrative that cities are resistant to growth and to change. So finally, based on the work that we have done and that we're continuing to do to collect data, and the resolution that you're about to consider, and also the conversations that we hope come out in your caucuses at 10 o'clock today, we will be finalizing the League's map to the gap, our platform on housing and how we will approach this problem over the next year and probably for a couple of years to come at least. So this will be something that we can spread far and wide as a clear lines of what we will do, the strategies that we are willing to do, and our lines in the sand. This will guide us as we represent the very unique needs of all of our cities and are able to ward off any of the one-size-fits-all approach solutions that we are sure to come this session. So back to the resolution that the board has asked me to present to you today. As you know, we held our first caucuses of commonality. We held our first caucuses of commonality at our mid-year conference this past spring. One of the messages that we heard from each of you is that you do understand, and you understand the need to plan for growth, but you're also very concerned about maintaining your unique character. This resolution has 6 parts: preparing for the future, and I'll let President Holbrook introduce the resolution, and we'll get it up on the screen, and then we can go through it.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was excellent information, and I think it's really valuable to hear some of the things that we're talking about in housing, whether it's affordable housing or housing affordability, and that those two distinctions to that. And I think that getting our partners, which are not only just the realtor groups, but also others as well, to recognize that is going to be really valuable. Okay, now we wanted to talk about, or we wanted to go ahead and officially close the credentials at this time and ask for a credentials report from the committee of the number of cities present, the number of total votes, and the 2/3 threshold for amendments or ratifications. So, and then Brandon, really quick, am I reading these out, the total numbers, or is this just information for, is this, where is Brandon? Sorry, I can't see very well. Oh, thank you. So would you like me to read this out? So we have,
Sorry, so the total votes we have, out of the 967 possible votes throughout the whole league, we have 419 present here this morning. Out of the 247 cities, we have 76 of you who, 76 cities and towns who picked up their voting, which is 30%. And for the total votes, that is 43% of the total votes available. And then you are, for those votes that are picked up, that is representing 69% of the population of our cities and towns across the state.
all right, so going into this is where we are at. Now that it's closed, we're going to go in the following order. We're going to have resolution number 4, and first off, we're going to go ahead and have Rachel come back. Our League Director of Government Relations, Rachel Ottoch, is going to present us with resolution 4.
That was a fun little break. I got to get off the stage for a minute. Thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, we held our first caucuses of commonality. And from that provided some of the structure that you'll see, hopefully, in this resolution. We've tried our best here to balance between being proactive and showing that we are preparing for growth while also maintaining our individual character and community and ensuring that we maintain local authority. So, can we get the resolution up on the screen? Hopefully you've all had time to review this. As I said, there are 6 parts here. And the first part discusses the overall preparing for the future, giving some of the population growth and local role data. So we use much of the information here from the Gardner report. We also discuss what we've already done here, what we have been doing to support these efforts, including actively endorsing SB 136 to look at transportation and land use connections. And also give a reminder that Utah cities and towns elect mayors and council members to be stewards of their communities. You are in the best position to guide our communities as we go forward into the future. So part 2 is about the housing gap, again using the Gardner data. Part 3 is about housing affordability. Part 4 is about affordable housing, again, different topics. Part 5 goes into the local keys and responsibilities. Again, clarifying that local government holds some of the keys to unlocking the housing policy problem, but doesn't hold all of the keys. So distinguishing what we have control over and what we don't have control over. Labor shortages, rising prices, and other things that we cannot control. Part 6 discusses the direct democracy process. This stems from a working group that has been meeting, or that met for the last year and a half, that resulted in HB 225 from last session. This was a bill that would modernize the referendum process, and this bill has been refiled for this coming session, and we continue to support the idea that, and the principles that, the direct democracy process needs to be more fair for both local government, for petitioners, and for private property owners. So there are some specific things in that bill that we think help clarify that process and make it more fair. And then finally, Section C goes into the actual resolution in a couple of different, it correlates back to the sections that you've seen before. So it says precisely what we will support and what we will oppose. And again, these are the high-level principles that will guide us as we determine what bills to support, what we want to propose in legislation as we work with the Commission on Housing Affordability chairs to actually draft legislation, what we will propose to put in those bills, and what we will stand firm against. So I'm happy to, if President Holbrook would like, I'm happy to answer questions about the resolution or open it up for any discussion that anyone would like.
So does anyone have any questions or discussion that they wanted to discuss in response to resolution number 4? I do see a hand over there, and the mic is coming, so just one moment. And if you wouldn't mind stating your name and your city, please.
Rachel, Jim Riding, Mayor West Jordan. We've got our city attorney here who's made some proposed suggestions to change some of the language in this, so I'd like to have him explain that.
Thank you. And actually, this proposed amendment we received after LPC on Tuesday, so hopefully you had a chance to, I should have mentioned that. That proposed amendment is also on our website, and we can put it on the screen now too. At least I'm thinking we can. I assume we can. We could before.
While that's coming up, let me just explain this, and I'll try to be quick, Rachel, and you tell me to stop. My name's Rob Wall. I'm the West Jordan City Attorney. Those of you who are here Wednesday in the Legislative Policy Committee, one of your peers and colleagues from Salt Lake City raised a very good point, and we talked about some language that might help. It's in, we need to go down, yes, that's the one. The first, do we have the red line of that, Rachel? It's the one that's in, I guess we can use this.
We
but
should.
It's in the, if you want to
can pull it up.
follow it, it's in the app. Anyway, that first comment says Utah cities and towns under 1.1, right there, 1.11. Utah cities and towns will support state initiatives. Our concern with that is if we say we support the initiatives, that presupposes that we will support whatever the state comes up with. So our proposed change here is that it would say that Utah cities and towns will engage with other stakeholders to formulate and consider state initiatives that facilitate the accommodation of population growth and then enhance flexibility of other revenue tools. Then if you go down to the third paragraph, it states that the cities and towns are willing to review ordinances, regulatory ordinances, processes to facilitate additional housing units where the infrastructure can support them, particularly near current and future transportation corridors. Again, we're willing to review them so long as the legislature doesn't imply from that we're going to agree to anything that diminishes your local decision-making in that regard. And, oh yeah, can you, and then pull up, okay, and then this third one, number 3, right there. That is all new language, even though it's showing up here as black, as if it was there on Wednesday. And let me just give you a 30-second background on why this is important. Many of you have been in circumstances where a legislator who is also a land developer will come into your city and propose a development that is inconsistent with your general plan, or propose a development along a corridor that everybody thinks someday will be a major transportation corridor, but you in the city don't have the infrastructure prepared to support that development, or you don't know if that corridor is ever going to be built the way you've master planned it. And there are numerous anecdotes that we've heard. Some of you who were in, your city attorneys were in a meeting yesterday where the city attorney Harriman gave an example of a freeway connection that Harriman City had proposed 8 years ago. And the state refused to engage with them in their master plan through state agencies. Harriman has now built a nice residential community there, and the state wants to come through now and put a freeway connection right where that development sits. It was master planned 8 years ago by Harriman. And so the intent here with number 3 is to say that cities and towns will engage with the state to formulate and no, go back up, back right where you were, back down. Right there, number 3. Engage with the state to formulate and consider state initiatives for funding the acquisition and development of transportation corridors of regional significance. Now stop right there. How many times, Rachel, have we heard we're going to start land use planning based upon corridors of regional significance? Well, that's all fine, and most of you in your general plans already do that. But we also need to consider infrastructure to support that, and that we're willing to engage in those conversations, as well as, once again, we're not preempted in your local decision-making where you have spent hours and years planning where those corridors ought to be and what infrastructure you need to have to support that type of development. So those are the 2 general areas of change, and those are the specific changes that we're proposing.
Did you want to engage it or short? Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that perspective. And I do recall when Lynn Pace did make that comment the other day. So I'm appreciative of that. Does everyone understand what the purpose of what their question or their amendment was on that language? And do we have any other questions? Right in the front row. The microphone's coming. And please state your name.
Jewel Allen from Grantsville. Could you turn to section, let's see, 4 or 5? Is it the direct democracy section? I just I just picked up on that today, that when we discussed it at LPC, there was the term referendum was brought up, and I just wondered why we couldn't use that language in this, because it just seems like more people might know what that means compared to direct democracy. In fact, a question was made last time, like, what is direct democracy? So is it something that can even be put in parentheses? That was just my thought.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back over to Rob Wall. Was that a motion? And I know Lynn is sitting over there as well. So if there's not any other questions, should I'd entertain a motion. With the mic.
Okay. Our great director of Wasatch Front Regional Council pointed out one more word we should change. The original language on Wednesday, which I did not change, says, go back to right there, 1-1, Utah cities and towns will oppose any state. Oh, sorry, thank you.
That's not moving.
There we go, right there. Let's change,
Okay.
let me read.
Just to clarify really quick, are you amending your amendment?
One word.
Okay.
Can you put the new text back up there, Rachel? Yeah. Sorry, we just worked this final language out last night. Let me just read it to you. Originally, it said that the cities and towns will support the stage. It's section 3. We said Utah cities and towns will engage with the state to formulate initiatives. We'd like to change that so that it reads Utah cities and towns will engage with other stakeholders to formulate and consider the state initiatives. The intent being that we'll engage not just with the state, but with UDOT, well, they are the state, Wasatch Front Regional Council, MAG, counties, businesses, and so forth. So just to expand the fact that this is a collaborative thing, it's just not the state. Is that good, Andrew? Yes. Okay.
Okay, and is that your official motion?
Is that a motion? I can't make the motion because I don't vote.
No, you can't, but.
This Mayor Riding, I will make that motion
Okay, so we have a motion
as it is changed.
with the latest verbiage that just changed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt Resolution 4 with the amended version, with the amended language that was just completed. Sorry, just the amendment. My apologies. So just the amendment. Is there any other questions? Do I have a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Do we need, from the, okay, quick question. On the amendment, do we need to have the percentages? Okay. Okay, sorry about that. We're trying to be very much more precise and everything else. So what I need to do again is the vote on the amendment. I need you all to put your cards up because we need to have a 2/3 majority. So all in favor, please raise your cards. Any opposed? Okay, we have a small percentage, so thank you very much. We appreciate that. So is this on the resolution or the amendment?
Microphone?
I wasn't sure if you were just making comments either, because it kind of sounded like a comment, so.
Really easy to edit things in front, with 200 people.
Okay.
See, and that's what I thought. If we're just voting on the language change, and we're not yet voting on the resolution, did I need the 2/3?
Okay, so I would like to make a motion that we include language in parentheses after direct democracy, that initiatives and referendum. Is that referendum or referenda? I don't know. What's the plural? Okay. Yeah, so that's my motion.
Yes. Yeah, watch.
Can we clarify that the motion you're making is to add, just in parentheses, initiatives and referenda, just to add in the header? Yeah. Okay. So under section 6, direct democracy, in parentheses, initiatives of, okay, thank you.
Okay, did everyone understand that? And we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Second. And I'm sorry, can you state your name? I can't see very well. Rodman. Did you get that? Okay. In Ivan? Oh, Highland. Thank you. Sorry. All right. Again, I'm going to need to have everyone raise your voting cards. Oh, discussion. I'm sorry.
Technically, the legal term should be correctly, and I think the right word is referral. I just want to make sure that we're clear on what we're voting on and what we're recommending.
Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure you're going to get another question.
Mayor, the term in the election code is ballot proposition, and so the terms initiative, referenda, and other ballot propositions. So what we could do with direct democracy is include the word that you just added, which was referral, and then but still use the term initiative and referenda, because those are the two terms that show up in the election code. And then we could also say or other ballot propositions, which would cover all of it. Okay. So that's an amended motion.
Okay, so now we're having an amended motion. So I know that you're typing that in. Does anyone have any other questions or discussions on this amendment? Oh, I thought I saw a hand, but I guess not. Okay, so again, I'd like to call on the original motion to be made. Are you willing to make the changes on your motion, or are you? Okay, so we have the motion now from Jewel Allen from Grantsville, who is going to include all of the data that now it's just completed on the screen. All right, I'm going to call again for a vote, and please raise up your placards. Oh, my apologies. Second is still good? Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Now do I have to do the resolution?
Okay, so now with those two amendments made to number 4, I'd like to call for a motion to approve. And I'm sorry, who said that? Damon. Thank you very much. And I have a second over here, Mayor Riding. Okay, again, everyone hold up your placards. Oh, sorry. I was all excited to have more discussion, and I forgot it. Okay, seeing no discussion. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, that resolution passes on number 4. The next resolution on the agenda is number 1, and we're going to call up our Executive Director, Cameron Deal.
Thank you, everyone. Hello again. Resolution number 2018-001 is now before you. For those who weren't at LPC on Tuesday, let me give a quick overview of the amount of time that the Board of Directors has spent on this particular issue. We've had 3 different board meetings where we've discussed medicinal marijuana and the initiative that's on the ballot, Proposition number 2. You'll notice that the language in there refers to both initiative and proposition. The discussion at the board level was over not about the marijuana per se. It was instead about the preemption language that appears in the initiative language. Can you go back to the PowerPoint? Would that be possible? So you may recall, I'm going to just jump to the land use piece here. You may recall that over the last few months that Kern McConkey, which is a premier law firm in town, released a memo that then was refuted by supporters of the initiative about some of the concerns that come out of the language in Proposition 2. We wanted to draw your attention, the board wanted to draw your attention to language specifically about land use and licensing and public safety. On the land use side, the language, this is word-for-word language out of the initiative. It says, municipality may not enact a zoning ordinance that prohibits a cannabis dispensary or production facility. Then, for full disclosure, you'll see in italics is the counter-argument from supporters about why that language is necessary in the initiative. Likewise, there are proximity requirements in the initiative that then run afoul of federal law, but the proximity requirements are the distance from community locations, schools, churches, and the like. And then the general preemption language in the initiative is it would preempt any ordinance or rule enacted by a political subdivision of the state regarding a cannabis production establishment, cannabis dispensary, and medical cannabis card. And then there's also language that starts to preempt some of your licensing authority. As the board considered this over 3 different board meetings, really the focus came down to land use, licensing, public safety, and your underlying authority as local governments to protect the health, safety, and welfare of your communities. And the board acknowledged that if nobody else that nobody else would bring up the land use concern except for the League of Cities and Towns. So it was a difficult process. I mean, I have board members here nodding their heads. Again, it was 3 board meetings worth of discussions before they put together the resolution. Can we go back to the resolution now, please? Over the last few weeks, there's been more and more discussion that regardless of what happens in November, that there will be efforts at the state capitol to discuss medicinal marijuana and to refine the framework, whether it passes or not. The governor, when he was here yesterday, as we were walking out with him, wanted to know where the league was at on medical marijuana and re-emphasized that he planned to use his bully pulpit to get it right, regardless of what happened. We told him then, the board has a resolution, the LPC's endorsed it, ratification will come tomorrow, because we want to make sure we're at the table when we're having this discussion about land use, licensing, and public safety, and the concerns that law enforcement has raised. So you'll notice that the language that the board put before you and does not use words vote for or vote against. Instead, it lays out the policy considerations that cause us concern as local government so that they can be addressed in the dialogue between now and November, and then hopefully in potential legislative action regardless of what happens in November. So President Holbrook, there's the background of the resolution and the explanation of 2018-001.
Thank you, Cameron. As Cameron mentioned, this did go through a lot of discussion and was passed by LPC on Tuesday. Does anyone have any discussion or anything else? Or should I call for a motion? Okay, I have hands here. Wait for the microphone, please, and please state your name.
So let's start, we'll go Brian, Lisa, and then there's a hand in the back.
Okay.
I'm Brian Braithwaite from Highland City. In the resolution, it talks about, it has a whereas in the middle, whereas the initiative as written continues, undermines the ability of law enforcement to investigate legal, and goes on. In this resolution, it doesn't really talk about the fact that we have the right by state to be able to impose certain kinds of things, and so I'm proposing that prior to that, we put another whereas, which defines what a city can do. It would say, whereas cities and towns have the traditional responsibility and authority to create laws, ordinances, policies, and procedures for local land use, legislative policymaking, licensing, public health, welfare, and safety, including law enforcement within their jurisdiction. So it's stating that we have the right to do that, and then the next whereas talks about how it's being infringed upon. I felt like it was important that we define that we have the right to do it before we talk about the infringement that it would cause. And it's not only for that particular whereas, but further into the resolution, it also brings that back up too. So I was using similar language that was used already in the resolution about the different areas that we have responsibility for, but I felt like that was important to be stated there, that we have the right given to us by state code that says we can do that.
Okay, next question.
Is that a motion? Yes.
Oh, that's a motion.
So Carson, give him back the microphone.
So I would make that as a motion to be able to add that as another whereas because of the reasons as stated.
Let's have him read it again so people can hear it.
Can you read that again, please?
Sure. Whereas cities and towns have the traditional responsibility, and I put in there traditional because that's how you've worded it multiple times, that the state could always take it back, but this is, traditionally, this is what they've given us the right to do. So whereas cities and towns have the traditional responsibility and authority to create laws, ordinances, policies, and procedures for local land use, legislative policymaking, licensing, public health, welfare, and safety, including law enforcement within their jurisdiction.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. First off, do I have a second? I have a second from Jewel Allen. Do I have any further discussion? Okay. Oh, I see some hands back there. Oh,
Well,
sorry.
no, Carson, go here first. This hand was up first.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to make Karsten earn his walking today.
He had a scooter, right?
Carice Thompson, Clearfield. So, speaking to that exact small paragraph, whereas cities and towns, sorry, hold on, let me see. Oh, my bad. Whereas the initiative as written undermines the ability of law enforcement to investigate legal or illegal use. I feel that's misrepresented. I'll explain why. First of all, when we talk about this debate, there's just been too many inaccuracies from someone who I understand how this all goes. First of all, when you have a card, according to this current initiative, I believe it says that the police directly have about 45 days where that card holder, whoever that is in their system. Now, if we would like to expand the amount of days that our police have the ability to access who is a medical marijuana card holder and who isn't, I'm amicable to that. But the reality is that a card holder, when you're talking about selling or using that card inappropriately, puts them at legal liability in itself. And if that's proven through investigation, I don't see how that would undermine. There is a separation here. When you're talking about full recreational usage, that is full undermining of the police's ability to be able to administer public safety. And I'll explain this from this angle of, in the California code, it says people who use recreationally are not allowed to use in front of their children. As someone who visited California recently, people do this all the time. And it was sickening to me, but I had to be around my mother. Anyways, that in the code itself is illegal, yet people do it. Yet police can't investigate it because it's just too broad. So now when we get back to our usage of the card itself, the police have it in their database. If we would say that we would like the police to have their database extended, or there's more accuracy within that database of who holds a card, I'm all for it. But right now, they can tell, they will be able to tell, and actually my worry is that because it's too short of a time, if a person renews their card or has a card for a period of time and the database isn't long enough and they could be profiled, then we get to the whole, are we gonna do War on Drugs 2.0 in the state of Utah? So for me, I think that I would more like the language to support opening up and extending that database so we can decide and know who is a card holder, so it will not undermine their ability to investigate.
Thank you. Carson's right there. Okay, and I believe that there were two other. Oh.
Yeah, there's two, and I can address.
Do you want to go ahead and address that? Well, Carson, if you want to go ahead, I think there were two other hands over there.
Councilmember Thompson, thank you for speaking up. I want to share what Bountiful Police Chief Tom Ross, when he presented to the League Board of Directors earlier this week, said about that particular line to try to give us some context for you as well as for the rest of the voting members here. The concern the Police Chiefs Association has raised has not been about the card per se. It's been about trying to reach the standard of probable cause when to approach an individual who is smoking marijuana, about the affirmative defense that is actually built into the initiative between when it would pass in November of 2018 and 2020 when the law would become effective. And so it creates this window of time that's really no man's land, where it's difficult for a law enforcement officer to approach an individual of probable cause to see if that individual is smoking recreationally or smoking or using, I shouldn't say smoking, but using marijuana medicinally or using marijuana illegally, and it puts a police officer in a difficult spot to approach an individual under the probable cause standard. There's also concern from the Chiefs of Police Association about the DUI standard under the initiative language and being able to enforce DUI laws for an individual who may be using marijuana, even if they're using marijuana medically and therefore legally. So that was the crux of that particular line.
So Cameron just stole my thunder. That was my question, because I agree with Chief Ross. Does this give the impression that the league supports this initiative, or I mean, because there's a lot of us that are against it. That's why I'm just wondering if that's the intent.
It doesn't say for or against the initiative.
So, thank you, and that was Mayor Earnshaw from Woods Cross. It doesn't actually, we specifically don't have language that has support in it. It's more, if you scroll to the very end, do you scroll to the bottom? Keep going. Go all the way where it says Resolution A. Oh no, sorry. Sorry, that's right. If it does not pass, this is where we're focused on, because we recognize that there is definitely a disconnect between, what we're seeing and what we're hearing from some of our public safety officials versus what we see that the public is heading towards. And so basically these last two, if Proposition 2 does not pass, then it talks about wanting us to work together with stakeholders to consider, to talk about the concerns, as you can see in section number 1. And then in number 2, if it does pass, we are going to urge the legislature, the governor, and the stakeholders to address our concerns in terms of public safety and other areas that can be impacted on that. So it is not a statement of support or against per se. It's more along the lines of let's get direction and let's make sure that we address these issues inherently so that this does not become the problem that it could potentially be. So I hope that that helps clarification.
Beth.
And there was another hand. Is that, you got that? Okay. Okay, more discussion up here in the front.
I'm sorry, I've lost track. Are we still talking, Mayor Watts, Herman City, are we still talking about the amendment, or are we talking about the item, or the, as a whole? I'm confused as to where we are right now.
At this point, we're still talking about the amendment. That's what's on the floor. That was a good question, though. The original motion was by Brian Braithwaite of Highland to add one section about the whereas, which is now highlighted on the screen, and it's in red. And that is his request to add that. And then we had a second, and I couldn't remember who the second is, so my apologies. Jewel. Thank you, Jewel. And so this is what the discussion is at this point, to include this one section of the whereas, but then the rest of it is intact. And then the others were questions on different topics in different areas. Good? Does anyone have any other discussion or questions? I'm sorry, I know, thank you. It's hard to see the hands. There's one in the...
We've got one. Well, hold on, the microphone will come to you to fix the grammatical error.
David Brickey, City Manager with West Jordan. I'd ask for a semicolon and an and then call the question.
Yeah.
So this is a grammatical.
Yeah, so it's called a question. So there's a grammatical error. Let's try to fix the grammatical error. And the question's been called.
Good morning. In the paragraph, Dennis, Mayor, Ivan City, whereas we are working in conjunction with the Utah Chiefs of Police Association is working in conjunction. Something's wrong there with the grammatical, isn't there?
Yep.
Okay.
And actually that was fixed in the previous version on Tuesday. It just didn't make it there. Sorry about that.
Thank you for that. Okay, so now, David Brickey, your grammatical point was directly to the highlighted version that we're discussing. Is that correct? Okay, so
now we're call question, so we're voting on the
okay. So back to the amendment that we're already discussing with the inclusion of that whereas. I'm going to call for a vote. Okay, all in favor, please raise your placards. Of the amendment. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, so the amendment is now in. So now we're going to bring it back to the discussion about the resolution number 2018-001 itself.
Thank you. Lisa Zump, Council Springdale. I just want to confirm that this resolution is specifically to mostly make sure that the towns and cities get to keep their authority rather than the state telling us what to do, and that it is not saying that the towns would get to override the state rule if this passes at the election, that the towns can't say, we don't want it, so we're not going to allow it. We just can say we may not allow dispensaries. Is that correct?
So Lisa, if it's okay, I'll address that. So Lisa, if the initiative passes as is, you would lose some of that authority. So what we're trying to do in the resolution is say that regardless of if the initiative passes or not, this local land use authority piece must be addressed, and it either needs to be addressed in cleanup legislation or it needs to be addressed when there's a bill after the election on medicinal marijuana. So if the voters approve it in November, you will lose some land use authority unless this gets addressed.
guess what I'm just wanting to confirm is that if it is legal in the state to have medicinal marijuana, can a town say, we will not allow it to be legally used in our town?
Nope. You do not have the authority if it passes in November.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other discussion? I see a hand back there.
Kevin Thomas, Hurricane City. My only concern is that maybe this initiative doesn't go far enough in expressing a desire for this not to pass. As an initiative as a whole, I would like to see this League of Cities and Towns support or declare that they're not in favor of the passage as well. But just my thoughts.
Thank you for that. So what we are trying to actually accomplish with this is to oppose some of the policy sides of that. And that's what we have stated in terms of we recognize that there's challenges and that we can be negatively impacted as cities and towns. And so that's what we are focusing on is the policy side of this discussion. And that's why we have the resolution the way that it's written. Does that have any, did that help at all? I've got a question over here. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jarrett Waite with Santa Clara. The only line that kind of caught me off guard was in the beginning where it says, cities and towns respect that marijuana does have medical benefits. I was wondering if what evidence was given to you that that is the facts. I believe that, but I wonder if we should change it to likely has medical benefits instead of does, just because I'm not sure the medical community is 100% can say does have medical benefits.
I don't think is that an amendment?
I feel like it could be, yes. I would make that to be an amendment. But I wanted to know if there was something given in board meetings that led the language to be that written that way.
There's empirical data on both sides of that. So, so if that is an amendment, do I have a second on that amendment? He simply wanted to change
the word likely. So
the word.
So second whereas marijuana likely does.
The second whereas, it says likely does. He wants to add the word likely. Is the amendment? Is the motion on the amendment? Sorry. Okay. Do I have a second on that amendment? Thank you. And I'm sorry, I don't know who that was.
Carice Thompson.
Thank you. Okay. Further discussion on the amendment. Were you going to do anything? No? Oh.
Oh, we got Mayor Pike.
I think preferential, first of all, Mayor Hart, Ivan City, I believe that preferential language would be may have.
Okay.
And would propose that that word be substituted for likely has.
So just to clarify, I'm sorry, did you say take out likely?
Yeah, likely, and the substitute would now say may have.
May have. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mayor Pike, I think. Carson?
Carson, up front.
Right there.
Just one thing that there may be concern with, I think, with adding these two words is, for one, and I don't know, may be okay with it, but I think it muddies the water a little bit in terms of it may give more fodder for those that would be in favor of the proposition generally to say we're against it. And while there is clearly, and there have been expressed some thoughts here that we oppose the proposition outright, I think what we're hearing here now is the reason why the board and the LPC members specifically chose and recommended to go the direction of not saying we're opposed to or in favor of the proposition is because as cities we could be divided on this issue. I think we are. Even as expressed today by some of the comments. So instead, what we typically do, I think, is a good thing, which is we go on the principles that we are founded on, that we are based on, that we advocate, such as land use authority, as Cameron mentioned earlier, and our authority to, in terms of law enforcement, those things. So anyway, for what it's worth, I'm not sure that the may have actually helps us. I think there's actually, based on state law, current state law, where there is some allowed use of cannabis oil and THC, I think actually there are facts behind the statement that marijuana can help people. So I think if we do this, it muddies the water.
So what's your recommendation with that?
Well, you know, it's a comment. My recommendation is I liked it the way it was. I think it's factual.
Okay, so we have here, and then we have a hand over there. So Carson there first.
Would it not be easier just to basically state that cities and towns will not debate the possible and verb it in a way where we're just saying we're not going to discuss whether or not there's medical benefits and move on, because it really doesn't matter to the initiative, to the resolution.
Thank you. And then, there you go. Definitely going to give Carson a prize for running.
I just want to thank Mayor Pike for his comments and state that I agree with them. This is Mayor Niehaus from Moab.
Thank you. So we had the original amendment to make the changes,
Which has been substituted.
which has been substituted, and now, Mayor Pike.
Could we just strike that line? Seriously, it's not needed.
So we already have a substitute motion on the floor. So we need to
So
vote
we-
on the substitute motion to insert language, so we could substitute the substitute.
I'll make a
motion.
substitute to the substitute that we drop that line, that we strike that line.
Okay, that was Mayor Pike. Do I have a second on that amendment? Okay, I have a lot of
Garden
seconds.
City Mayor for the
Thank
official
you,
second.
Garden City, for its official second. All right, let's go ahead and vote on the substitute of the substitute, which is to delete the entire whereas cities and towns respect that marijuana may have medicinal benefits. Okay, I'm going to need to have everyone use their placards. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you. That amendment passes. So we are going to strike that line. Now we're going to go back to the original resolution, 2018-001. All right, I'm going to call for a motion. All in favor of this resolution, please raise your placards. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. Thank you. So we have first is Mayor Pike, second motion, or second is Mike Mendenhall, Spanish Fork. Thank you. All in favor? Please raise your placards of resolution. Sorry? Yes, thank you. Okay, I apologize. Any further discussion on the motion to approve Resolution 2018-001 as amended with the deletion? Seeing no
Yeah, as amended with the, because yours is an amendment, the other one was a deletion.
This is a
You said it
deletion.
right. Yep, you're good.
Okay, now I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your placards. Any opposed? We have a handful. All right, Resolution 2018-001 passes. Okay, the next resolution that I'm going to ask, I'm going to invite John Hiskey to come up and talk about Resolution number 2.
Thank you very much. My name is John Hiskey. I had the privilege of working with an incredible team of people that shows the strength of this league when it's united. Issues pertaining to water became at the forefront of this last session of the legislature. Issues pertaining to the Constitution, the way we're allowed to manage and operate our systems and our water. Relationships to people who live outside our borders, how are they treated? Relationships relative to canyons here in the Salt Lake County area that affect watershed, how are those dealt with? And also extraterritorial jurisdiction. Cutting to the quick, if you look at, may I do this, I apologize, I would really be remiss. The group of people who did so much, Sean Guzman, St. George, was on the committee that did the constitutional amendment. Mark Stratford, we need to build some sort of an honorarium for him. He is the drafter of most every possible piece of support legislation for this. We had Dave Decker from Provo. Both of these gentlemen are also on the State Water Task Force. Salt Lake City, Laura Briefer, Lynn Pace, Rusty Vetter, Mike Reberg. Sandy City, Tom Ward, Evelyn Everton, Scott Ellis, Kim Bell, Abby Hall. And we had Keith Bradshaw, council member from Santaquin. This group united. Now, ironically, and I was accused of doing anything I could to avoid that last week of the legislature. You may remember we had snow. Do any of you remember what snow was? Well, I do. I took a fall, I broke my hip, ended up in an ambulance and a hip transplant. So my friends and associates said I'd do anything to get out of that. Well, they carried on. Much to my chagrin, 4 study groups were established over the course of this interim. My last count, we had 30-plus meetings, and there was one, in fact, yesterday. Each of those at least 2 hours. There have been 60, 80 hours of work put into this. Now, before you right now is the essence of this to change the state constitution. And the change is intended to address historical needs. As we've seen growth have impacts of dire impact, not dire, with great impact. And relative to that, for example, if I may, if we could go down to just about halfway down for the whereases, whereas the Constitutional Amendment Study Group, that included Sean Guzman, they drafted a proposed amendment to Article 11, Section 6 of the Constitution. Now, also, just below that, I want to note this. This constitutional amendment is the framework from which we work. There's going to be statutory language to reinforce and strengthen our positions and uphold our positions for local control. Now, may we go down to the therefore, and I apologize for cutting quick here, but we're running tight here. We ask you to support a proposed amendment to Article 11, Section 6 of the state constitution. Very, very brief summary. The key highlights of this that address growth. In St. George, they've had growth of communities all around them. There's a plant that is operating, and St. George has those responsibilities, yet it serves mostly other cities and the conservation or conservancy district. To be able to dispose of that plant, now that's a water work, that is not water rights. They will not be able to dispose of water rights. But that water work, for a better purpose, could be disposed of, aliened, however, only to another public purpose user, not for privatization to another public purpose. The other element is this growth element. We saw about half of you who responded to the survey. You are serving residents outside your corporate boundaries, your municipal boundaries. How do you deal with them? How do you handle them? There was a representative that talked about transparency, talked about enfranchising them, things of that nature. That became an issue. What came up was to substitute, instead of our control as cities being confined to our residents, if you will, and then trying to deal with those we serve outside, this would provide for a designated water service area to replace that, approved by ordinance. In other words, as a city, you are serving perhaps this geographic area in front of me, and you have persons out in this area you're still serving water to. You can include them as part of your designated service area. So you establish an equal protection concept. Does that mean they all pay the same rate? No. You do not lose the authority based on reasonable data to establish the appropriate rates for those people. In some instances, persons outside your jurisdiction, they did not pay the property tax that built the system. There's a feature that you could allow for an add-on on that. I want to emphasize that that gives you more flexibility relative to a municipality. It does not interfere with your contractually being able to work out contracts in excess of your needs, of your water needs, and it addresses, in summary, and again, I regret my brevity here to not perhaps do it justice, It is a great step forward. And there will be ongoing meetings, even as there was yesterday, for the statutory language, which will come back to the Legislative Policy Committee to reinforce our abilities that we set these boundaries by ordinance, reasonable rates, those types of features that address and protect our interests. That is a very, very quick summary. With all respect, I would appreciate if there could be a motion to so approve.
Thank you, John. We appreciate your background and working on this. Do we have any questions regarding Resolution 2018-002? If we can just briefly make them, so.
This is Robert Hale, Mayor of Midvale. Okay. I'm Robert Hale, Mayor of Midvale City.
Yes, sir.
What in here protects those who are desiring to de-annex from one service area into another? For example, I receive Salt Lake City water, me and about 49 other lots, and Midvale City can service this same area, and I just want to make sure the right to de-annex is protected in this resolution.
I'm sorry.
It's untouched.
It's untouched. Pardon me, I was talking to Cameron. That was not referenced at all, so that would remain in place. This deals with changing from your boundaries, where you're serving, to establishing a designated service area. Persons you serve, it does not touch those other elements of it, Mayor. It does not interfere with that. Does that make sense, if
Yes.
I better state that?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There's another question. Carson, right behind.
Oops, I'm sorry.
No, I know, we're both like.
Brent Freeze, Providence. I've got a problem in the first whereas when you have water's an irreplaceable. I would like to strike that. I agree water is a precious and finite resource, but it does rain and snow.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
To strike the word, can you state that again, please?
Whereas water is a precious and finite resource, and then continue on from there.
So to strike the word irreplaceable?
That is correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have an amendment motion. Do I have a second? Sorry, and I'm...
Washington City.
Washington City, thank you. Do I have any discussion on the deletion of the word or the two words "and irreplaceable"? I heard, yeah, there we go.
Richard Barnett, Richfield City. Rain and snow replenishes water supplies. It does not replace water. Water is an irreplaceable resource. We can't live without it.
Okay. Do I have any other discussion? Oh, sorry, that in the back, thank you.
I just want to speak to the fact that the water, I believe, is irreplaceable, that we don't have a choice. We can't go buy any from somewhere. We're completely dependent on God to rain it down upon us, so I think we ought to keep that.
Okay. With those comments, I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment. Yep. A motion on the amendment. The amendment was stated to delete "and irreplaceable." So with that being said, I'm going to call on a vote to just that amendment portion. Please raise your placards. All in favor of that amendment? There already was a second. Thank you. All opposed? Okay, we're going to go ahead and keep the original language and include the "and irreplaceable." All right, with that being said, on Resolution 2018-002, do I have a motion to approve? So moved. Mill Creek Mayor? Logan, okay. All right, I have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on the resolution? Okay, please use your placards. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Now I'm going to call Cam back up to discuss resolution number 3.
Thank you, President. This is a short one. You may recall back in April that we had a discussion in the business session about the non-binding opinion question on the ballot in November that would increase the motor fuel tax. Quick background, the increase in motor fuel tax would put all that motor fuel tax money per state law into transportation. 70% to the state, 30% to locals. Then, as part of the overall education compromise, that 70% of new state revenue from the motor fuel tax would replace current state general fund money being spent on transportation. So it would be a dollar for dollar exchange at the state level, and that state money from the general fund would move from transportation to education. That's the 70% portion of the motor fuel tax on the ballot. The other 30% per state law goes to you. And we made it very clear as this compromise was coming together at the end of the legislative session that the state should not negotiate away your 30%, and the state agreed. And so the resolution that the board approved on Tuesday and put before you addresses the fact that if voters approve this, the gas tax on the ballot, that we as local governments should still receive the 30% according to consensus formulas, and that generally supportive of any and all efforts to increase the motor fuel tax to address our local transportation needs.
Okay, do I have any discussion on resolution 2018-003? I think we pretty much had discussion in the past on this one, so. Okay, I have a motion to approve from Highland. The second, Kent Bush from Clearfield. Thank you. Do I have any further discussion on the motion? Okay, please use your placards. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost missed you.
I just want to clarify if this is dealing with only the 30% or if this has anything to do with the 70%.
It's 100%. So it's a support of this, the Our Schools Now initiative that would, that has the 70% going to the general fund to replace what's being pulled out for transportation, and that then would go to public education. And then that 30% would go directly to the cities and towns. But it's a support of the entire 100%.
So if we vote for this, we are supporting then that the road tax be used for education?
That is correct.
And the substitute, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, it's a complicated thing because the road tax dollars will not be spent on education. It's a dollar for dollar exchange at the state level. We can't get an increase in the gas tax without a state increase in the gas tax. So that's why when President Holbrook says you're voting on the full 100% gas tax, it's the only way for us to get our portion is for that whole portion to be increased. The resolution then says for the city 30%, it needs to come to us and it needs to address local transportation needs.
Does that clarify your question?
I think that clarifies it, but I'm against road taxes being spent for education.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further discussion on the motion to approve?
You should just point out road taxes are not spent on education under this proposal.
Okay. And just to clarify again, the road taxes is not spent on education in this proposal. We would retain that full amount for roads. I hope that clarifies it.
And then general fund money that's currently on transportation at the state level would move from transportation to education. But 100% of the gas tax increase will be spent on transportation. 70% at the state level, 30% on the local level.
Any further discussion on the resolution? Okay, please use your placards. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes.
Perfect.
Thank you again, everyone.
Now you can call up the executive board.
Okay. Now I'd like to invite up the executive board. I'd like to...
Sorry, just now switch to the PowerPoint.
Okay. I'd like to invite up Mayor Pike from St. George, Councilmember Mike Mendenhall from Spanish Fork, and Steve Hyatt, our past president. This is the fun stuff, I guess. Oh, the fun stuff. There's a PowerPoint coming. Slowly. Not yet. Good job. Oh, thanks. I was like, oh, I got myself confused. Whoops. Oh, and Gary Hill. My apologies. I think he'd said he was here. Oh, there he is. So you might have noticed a couple of changes. One of the changes that our board voted on about 6 months ago was to include a UCMA, the City Managers Association representative, and Gary Hill was nominated by that organization to sit on the executive board. And so now that's going to be a permanent addition to our executive board team. So now I have no idea what we're doing.
I think it's me. It's my pleasure to introduce the new executive board to you for 2018 and 2019. And at this time, invite second vice president, the new second vice president, Mayor Mike Caldwell of Ogden, to come up here with us. You can see him over here. He's a tall, handsome mayor, isn't he? Really quick, before we go to the next slide, the process of serving on this committee was rewarding. It was rewarding, and I know the committee members that I've seen in here have expressed that as well. It did not have challenges like all public life does. I thought really quick in our public life, there's always challenges. I kind of brought up my first challenges that are at the top of my mind when I was elected to City Council in Spanish Fork. And if anybody from Spanish Fork is in here, they'll remember those. But I remember getting an email, and this won't be just what germane to my city. I know you all deal with this, but I remember getting my first email after being elected, and it was saying, hey, if that road goes through that's been planned for a decade that connects to the high school, my special needs son lives on that road, and you know, basically blood would be on your hands if that road's approved. I thought, my goodness, what did I get myself into? The next email after that was, if you approve that adult novelty shop to be built in Spanish Fork, Utah, I will do everything in my power to vote against you. And I thought, oh boy, what have I got myself into? And that similar feeling was somewhat there with the committee that had to decide such great candidates. Cameron mentioned over 30 candidates that were very overqualified and much qualified to serve on the board. And I hope all of you have recognized that your service is needed and definitely wanted and warranted here at the League. So thank you again for your applications, and thank you to those that applied and will apply in the future. With that, I'll move on. First, I wanted to maybe give a quick update. I know I've got a lot of messages from some of you here and stopped me in the hallway too. A fire update in Spanish Fork and Elk Ridge and Woodland Hills. You've seen some of the photos, pretty scary stuff, but we have some evacuation orders in Elk Ridge and Woodland Hills, mandatory evacuation, some pre-evacuation in Spanish Fork. However, the fires died down a little bit today, and they're trying to get on top of it. A Type 1 crew, federal crew there. But what I did want to point out to you is there is the people that are protecting life and property in our city are the local crews. I've been sent pictures of the Provo, Orem, Springville, Mapleton Fire Department trucks rolling through our town to save property in our town and the cities next to us. So yes, thank you. Local government at its finest, and I know you all know that we help out where we need to help out. So from my city to yours, thank you so much. With that, we'll roll to the next. You can see the departing board of directors for 2017-2018. Former mayor of Kaysville, Mayor Steve Hyatt, and I think he warrants a round of applause from all of us. It's a little bit of a broken record of how much work Mayor Hyatt has done for the league the last few years, but the time, energy that he's put in there has really brought us to a great point where we're just continuing the upward trend. Sandy Council Member Steve Fairbanks, if he's here, I'm not sure I saw Steve this morning. He's been here. Oh, back surgery, great. Well, glad he waited till after the conference, the end of the conference. Heber Mayor Colleen Potter, is she here? I've seen her here before. I think she was taking a phone call as well. Layton Mayor Bob Stevenson, is he here? Mayor Stevenson? Yes, right over here. Commissioner Stevenson, is that now correct? Yes?
Will be.
Green River Mayor Pat Brady. Is Mayor Brady here? I don't think he made it. He moved to Alaska. Oh, well, there you go. He moved to Alaska. He's not here. Hopefully. That's what public service will do to you. It'll have you move off the lower 48. Again, great service to the board that these fine people were. I, as a younger elected official, had a great opportunity to learn from these folks as well as the rest of the board. So with that, we'll move to the incoming board for 2018, 2019. Do we have that slide? Because I didn't bring my notes. I don't want to do it by memory. So first of all, you know that Mayor Pike will be leading the charge as our next president. I'll be in support with him, and President Holbrook will take Steve Hyatt's. He called it a washed-up position. I don't think it was washed up, but change that? Yeah, we'll get a different name. You can see from Area 1, Damon Can of North Logan. I know Damon's here. Damon right here. You can see him. Area 2, Mayor Caldwell. Second Vice President of the Utah City Managers Association, Gary Hill, that's here with us. And I already mentioned immediate past President Beth Holbrook. Out of Area 2 as well, Jim Talbot, the Mayor of Farmington, will be representing the league board. Aaron Mendenhall from the Salt Lake City Council, Don Christensen from the West Valley City Council, Don Ramsey of South Jordan, the Mayor of South Jordan, Mayor Silverstreeny of Mill Creek, Council Member Brett Graham from Holiday, Jewel Allen, Council Member from Grantsville, Council Member Nicole Martin of Harriman, and that rounds out Area 3. Area 4, Council Member Mendenhall, myself, Mayor Kafusi of Provo, and Mayor Bierman of Park City. I saw Mayor Bierman here earlier. Mayor, are you over here? Right there. There he is. He's another tall, handsome mayor. We should do another caucus that's the Tall, Handsome Mayor Club. I'm not in that, Mayor Pike. Yeah. Area 5, Dr. and Mayor Richard Barnett of Richfield, or excuse me, Council Member Richard Barnett, and Mayor of Mayfield, John Christensen. That rounds out Area 5. Area 6, Mayor Baker of Naples. Area 7, Mayor Pike, our president, and Mayor Wilson Edwards, Miley Wilson Edwards of Cedar City. And Area 8, Mayor Niehaus of Moab. I saw Mayor Niehaus here earlier too. Raise your hand, Mayor. Right here. Yeah, there she is. So that rounds out our 2018-2019 Board of Directors that will serve you, the league membership, this upcoming year. And again, it's been an honor and a privilege to get to know some of these people that I didn't know before, and all of you as the league membership. So let's give them all a round of applause if we could. Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Cameron. After that great round of applause, I hope this goes the same way, that we have to vote for this. So that was the recommendation of the committee that interviewed the candidates, and now it's up for ratification to this body. So if there's a motion and then a second, and so moved here. Mayor Watts, Harriman, okay. Second here. Fruit Heights, a second from Fruit Heights. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your placards. Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. I was watching for your city manager to vote against you. Yeah, too. Yep, thank you. Thank you all. Maybe another round of applause. Thank you.
So our president remains, and through this conference, Beth Holbrook. I just want to take this opportunity to, I hope on your behalf and every member of the League of Cities and Towns, to thank Beth for her service. She's an incredible servant leader. It's been a pleasure to work with her for a number of years now, and these last few years on the executive committee. So, and I'm sure most of you saw that she was recently appointed to be one of the 3 commissioners, 2 for starters, for the UTA, and that was a selection made by the governor. And so that's impressive, and also I think very beneficial to cities, to all of us here. I'm thrilled to have Beth represent us as well in a way there, and another former president of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, Carlton Christensen. So we just need one more from Utah County, and hopefully they come from the league. Anyway, Beth, thank you very much. I'd like to give you a large token of our, isn't that awesome? Mayors, don't we need these at City Hall? May be too tempting to use for other purposes. But Beth, we just would like to give you this very nice gavel so that you will use it wisely at the UTA or wherever you choose to, and present that with you now. And again, our extreme gratitude for your years of service with the Utah League of Cities and Towns.
Thank you so much. Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so touched. I really, that really just means a lot to me. And I have to tell you how much I have really just enjoyed getting to know everyone here and working with them and really focusing and making sure that our cities are taken care of and protected. And I'm going to get emotional. I'm going to try not to. I could not have done this without the support of my wonderful children and all of the people in not only in my city council, but in other cities as well in Davis County. They've just been so supportive. And literally everyone here has come up to me and said something positive. And I just wanted to say thank you so, so much. And I really do look forward to continuing our relationships on a different level and being able to be as connected as I am in the league with you as my role of UTA. And again, thank you so much for all of your support and all of your willingness to talk to us and engage us as a league and as an individual. I truly am honored. So thank you.